So this is going to be a demonstration of a one-point perspective cityscape drawing. As you can see it here in super fast motion, so you can get a sense of what this demonstration will be, and if this is something that you want to hear more about the details of how it's done, the little nuances, um, then you can stay tuned and listen to the tutorial. The tutorial ahead is for the line drawing, and if you want to skip or continue on to the shading tutorial, that will be in the next video. So if you want to skip ahead to about 1:40, 1 minute and 40 seconds into the video, that's where the actual tutorial will start, if you've already seen this part. But if you want to keep watching the speed art here, then stay tuned and enjoy. Alright, so here we are, a blank piece of paper, and I'm dropping in the eye level. This is also known as the horizon line, and I'll put my vanishing point where I'd like it to be on the eye level. Make sure I'm drawing that eye level lightly, because most of it gets erased. Just so that you know, this video footage is at about 150% speed, so 1.5 times. I sped it up so that the video won't be so long. So as you can see here, to make these buildings, start with a vertical, and I like to start with the ones that are closer up, the vertical line, and I like to give a sense that it's going off the paper, and that gives you, the viewer, a sense that the world that they're viewing exists in more space than just what fits on the paper. If you make all your buildings just fit on the paper, it kind of looks very isolated. And the approach here is, when you start in the foreground and you make the larger buildings, it's actually a lot simpler to then underlap. And if you want to create space between buildings, then you would underlap a rectangle and then use the vanishing point to make it 3D and cut it off. And it's really, like I just did right there, it's simple to just tuck an underlapped rectangle back there and make it 3D, and it instantly fills in that space. It just makes the cityscape a little bit more full, if you will. I can keep going back there. Looks like I'm going to do that. So I'm actually this is a connected building, but it's taller. Then it underlaps like a rectangle, and then use the vanishing point. And as you cut off, the further back you go, the thinner you want to get. And right there, I wanted to not let those lines show through. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is as you make buildings further away, closer to your vanishing point, you want to make everything a lot smaller, more compressed, to maintain that sense of scale. If you make things bigger, as you get closer into the vanishing point, it will appear to make those buildings seem extremely large. They're just further away. Now here I'm starting off with the rectangle facing us, so it has a horizontal top and a horizontal bottom, and then I'm going to make that 3D, and then choose where I want to cut it off. And it's that sidewalk path down there pretty much represents the bottom of the building, and that's how it was across the street as well. So there, I'm erasing the eye level. Now at a certain point, if I bring in the bottom, if I don't come all the way out to the sidewalk, then it's going to look like the building is more set back. and that's an option, just as you can see in the video here. Now I'm going to take those corners, aim them to the vanishing point, just a little bit, and cut them off. And you can see that that second building right there, it's behind the first one, and it also seems like it's set back off the sidewalk. Now I'm going to skip some space, come way out to the sidewalk, and because it came so far out right there, it simulates that there's a large gap between that second and that third building, and that could be a road or an T intersection, or maybe it goes off into a little park or something like that. Who knows? Now, when you put in horizontal lines like this, you're sort of simulating crosswalks or intersections, and it's really important that these are horizontal, parallel to your eye level. The further back you go with those, the closer together you'd want to make those lines. The closer into the foreground you get, the more further apart they can be because they're closer. So here I'm just building back, and again revisiting the idea that when you build back, you're underlapping, but you're making things a lot thinner. You're not sending it off. Now that we're so far away, we're working so far away there that I'm starting to work more free-handed a little bit and a little bit more vague. And I'm doing that on purpose because all those details of what's further away, you don't want them to be that important. There's atmosphere between the viewer and that really distant detail. And that's how it is in real life. So we're trying to simulate real life. Now right here, I'm going to put a kind of a skyway between these two buildings. And all you have to do there, and I already did a little one there, but I'm going to do a closer one here. All you have to do is make a rectangle first that simply connects those two buildings. And because it's above the vanishing point, I'm going to aim down to the vanishing point just like that. And then put the cutoff, and that creates the underside of the skyway. Since we can't see through it, at least in this drawing, I'm going to do a little bit of erasing. This is why we draw lightly the whole way. A lot of things might need to get erased. As you can see later in the video, things can easily get refined, especially in the next video when I apply shading techniques. You can see a little bit of shading show up in this drawing, but not much. So as I was saying before, those faraway details, just let them be looser, a little vague, a little less sharp, and it will create the illusion of atmospheric perspective, which is a vocabulary word we use in class, where we purposefully draw things vague and faded, or duller, or not as detailed, that are off closer to the horizon. So right here I'm dropping in just the height of a figure, more to give myself reference. So if a figure was that tall on that building, then like how tall would a door be, or where would the windows go? And that just helps me to put things at a proper size with respect to everything else. So anytime you're putting lines or details on a building, the front part of the building facing you, those lines would be very straight, horizontal or vertical. And then when lines travel away from you, you have to be committed to the vanishing point. One mistake some students or beginners tend to make is they forget about that vanishing point and they just make diagonal lines instead. And then they start making those diagonal lines parallel to one another, and it breaks the illusion of rational three-dimensional space. Windows on the side of the building that's facing us are normal rectangles. I try to make them equally spaced apart. You can also see in this video I'm sort of refining lines. Adding these little ledges. See how this goes? I'm going to put one right there, aim it to the vanishing point, make it Make it come out a little bit, give it some height, aim that to the vanishing point and draw off. Then that cuts in and gives me another spot to aim to the vanishing point. These ledges, these architectural details, these are the things that make your drawing really work. You're really selling it to the viewer. When you have these additional details, it gives your drawing a lot more texture, a lot more visual interest. In this case, those doors, it's going off the paper, and I'm just going to let it go off the paper. So an easy way to make, say, an overhanging is I just made that little angled line, aimed it to the vanishing point, and drew back off the paper. Give it a double line for some thickness. Those lines are equally spaced apart. So the height lines of a window would be straight. I'm going to divide that up. That corner through the middle tells me where the next one goes if I want them equally spaced apart. Now I'm going to line it up, and that's going to tell me where those spots would be on the next window up. I line up to this one, and it gives me the lines up there. I go to the next one that I had already figured out, and it gives me the lines up there. That's going to create the sense that these windows are in line with one another. Even though my drawing is not perfect, it signals to the mind of the viewer that there's a logic to this structure. So this is going to be my attempt at a parking garage. So it's very, very large. And you'd be able to see that floor level cut in and underlap right there. Same with the ceiling right there. So that immediately makes that space look like it's open. So I'm going to put a little stopping arm there. So that's the part, that's the base, and then aim it to the vanishing point. Put a little double line to the vanishing point, like that, and it creates a sense of like a crossing stopping arm that stops cars from going in and out when they don't have permission. We're going to try to add more levels to this parking garage. You have to remember that these are not diagonal lines, they are orthogonal lines. In a one-point perspective drawing, horizontal lines are straight, vertical lines are straight, and everything else is using the vanishing point. They're called orthogonal lines. Very rarely will you see any diagonals for no reason, unless it's part of a pattern or the awning that I drew on the lower right that required a diagonal line because it came out at an angle. So right here I'm just simulating some sort of detail on the building, keeping them horizontal and as equally spaced apart as I can without getting a ruler. Need to redefine this line. Looks like I'm just thinking it through here. What do I want to do? I'm estimating size and height by comparing it to other parts of the drawing to maintain some sort of consistency. So now I'm going to double that distance. Reestablish that bottom part. Oh, I'm going to put in some architectural reinforcements on the corner. Kind of a double vertical line up there. And then I'll make another one on the other side. And again, it's a nuanced detail, architectural detail to the building that adds a visual interest. So there's the height of the door, then aim it to the vanishing point for the top. Actually, that's not a door, that's going to be a window. We'll have a doorway on this side of the corner. It's a bit of an alcove there. Now I can aim that to the vanishing point and draw off. It gives a little path out of the doorway. So these are all equally spaced apart, horizontal. And then I take about that general area, aim it to the vanishing point to place in the orthogonal parts of the building. So I'm making some windows, but I'm doing it sort of assembly line style. I make all the verticals. It helps me make sure that they're about the size I want, that they line up. Tops and bottoms of the windows go to the vanishing point. They're not diagonal, they are orthogonal. And then I'm going to make sure the other side of the windows all line up to each other like that. And these sides are easy, these are just going to be rectangles going off the paper. Another little awning right there. Kind of an angled line with a horizontal. That's not really using perspective. It's a little bit of faking it there. Reestablishing some lines. Now I'm creating a series of equally spaced vertical lines, and I'm basically doing a grid across that building right there. So some buildings are made of siding, some buildings are made of bricks, and these just have this kind of grid architectural structure on there, and that's facing us. But then there's the side of the building that's going away from us, so I'm going to put my pencil on each one of those lines and then aim it to the vanishing point, even if it's just a little bit. It's going to create and maintain that illusion of three-dimensional reality. And I need to redefine that corner so it doesn't get lost. There we go, now we can see it better. And redefining certain lines is really key. If they start to get lost and they're key to the drawing, you don't need to darken them, but sometimes you do need to redraw them. So there is a little bit of shading right there. It's not a shaded drawing yet, but sometimes it makes sense if it just helps the viewer define certain areas. You can add a little bit of shadow. But for the most part, I would get most of the drawing penciled in before you do a lot of shading. So there I did these orthogonal lines that are equally spaced apart, but using the vanishing point, obviously. And I'm trying to make some doors down there that are kind of go inward. They cut in a little bit. So by drawing those little horizontal accents there, it creates a sense that you can step into those areas. There's a little bit of a shelter there. Now I'm going to drop in those horizontals just quickly free-handed. Put in a vertical. And so that this edge of the building doesn't get lost, kind of got to get it back a little bit. Here's another example of just creating an overhang ledge. You just go a little further and then undercut it. And then it gives you an additional line to draw off of the vanishing point. If you can get some practice making these little gutters or overhang ledges. They're not super difficult. Once you get the hang of it, you can start dropping them into your world, and in my opinion, it gives this added relevance to the image. It just helps us sort of feel like we're in a real place with real objects with real functionality, and it's not just a drawing of some boxes, but there's actual nuance to the details. So this building is going to be a brick wall building. So I'm making all of these brick orthogonal lines equally spaced apart, but they all aim to the vanishing point. This is actually the easy part. Actually, making bricks isn't so hard. But remember, at the corner of that building, they're going to the vanishing point. But then from the corner horizontally on the front face, they have to be horizontal. So to make these look like bricks, I line up the straight edge, and then I go every other one. And then I line it up again for the next set, and then I go every other one again, but the other way. Just kind of keep doing that. Let them get a little closer together. You can see I'm sort of doing the trick where if you go the corner through the middle of the next line, then it tells you where the next one goes. I'm doing it very subtly. Right there, see how I'm doing that? It tells me where the next set of bricks should go, or the brick lines should go. Right there, yep. The logic of how to make things equally spaced apart in perspective is really useful. So now I have to do this horizontally. This is the front part of that building, so they're not using the vanishing point, but I'm lining up to each brick, going horizontal off of it. Now I'll line that up and stagger every other one. And then at a certain point here, I feel like I can just freehand that in. And this basically concludes the line drawing portion of this cityscape. In the next video, you can see how I can finish this drawing using shading techniques. There I'm dropping in some characters just for some point of reference. And somewhere at the end there, I'm going to redefine the corner of that building. And then we're just going to be ready for some shading. See ya in the next video.